name's Kerry Allison. I am a charity coordinator with the Bridge for Heroes. I am a wife, stepmum to two lovely stepdaughters. I'm a cat mum to a beautiful old tabby. I'm currently still a registered nurse, and I'm also a female veteran. I'd moved to Kings Lynn, and again, serving in the army, I was working away, so I was in and out of town infrequently, shall we say, but I quite often would walk past the Bridge drop-in centre. You know, it was clear that it was a veterans type association, and then one day I walked past, the sign was out in the street saying, come in, you know, for a cuppa and a chat, and I just thought, you know what, this time I will. Stepped through the door. From there, I initially got involved as a volunteer, did various things. I was also able to access their services as a beneficiary, you know, through various changes in life circumstances. And then as I transitioned from serving, I became a civilian, and I landed a job working with the Bridge for Heroes. So yeah, I'm now part-time charity coordinator with and for the charity. Joined up, I did do my full 22 years service, so when I joined up 2001, it was still very much, you know, the Armed Forces Career Office. You could pop in. It's a bit of a strange thing to me. I wasn't particularly physical, I wasn't particularly into the armed forces. I sort of dabbled in cadets at school. But I think basically I had lost my way a little, not in any sort of dramatic fashion. I'd got off to university, did a degree in biochemistry, but by the time I'd finished that course I wasn't enjoying it. I'd come home and it was a case of, you know, what do I do next? And at the time my mother's partner, he was ex-serving, so he was an ex-RSM, so he had a very positive take on what an army life had meant for him. So I had some sort of bad ideas off. And I originally sort of pursued going in as an officer, and as the selection process went on, I ended up joining as a soldier in the intelligence corps. I remember it fondly. I think we've sort of discussed before that it became my life, and there was aspects of it that were really, really enjoyable. I think things become a sort of a blessing and a curse, don't they, in some ways. Jobs changed every 2 to 3 years, you know, your nature of your postings, so it meant I was moving around. I spent most of my time within the United Kingdom, and that was just the nature of roles and jobs at the time. My first job was out in Northern Ireland, and again it was a really good experience because it was because we were basically not quite confined to base, but because people couldn't go home at weekend, for example, because you know that would be back in the UK mainland. It meant that people were there and we had a community, and you know, so we worked together and played together. So there was that sense of sort of camaraderie, you know, one of our favourite words here at the Bridge. But yeah, and that was a really positive experience. It was nice. I got to stay. Again, it's not terribly exotic, but I got to stay in parts of the UK that I wouldn't have gone to otherwise. You know, I spent a lot of time in Lincolnshire. I spent time in Birmingham. I spent time in Portsmouth. So cities that you wouldn't necessarily visit unless you had family there, say, for example. So you got to know lots of different places. I was, for a lot of my time, I was single, so I was able to, my time was my own. So when I had downtime, I was able to go and visit friends and family sort of all over the UK, and that was always quite exciting. In terms of serving abroad, I had nothing too exotic or uncomfortable. I mean, a lot of my peers did serve in Iraq and Afghanistan, but my timings were such that I didn't see operational service in these places. I was fortunate enough to spend some time out in Kosovo, so I had a 4-month detachment there, but again it was a great environment. It was multinational, we worked very closely with Italians, Germans, and it was a very different experience. And I think as well, it afforded me a certain lifestyle. I think at the end of the day, it was a good income. I was able to buy my first house, I was able to visit places, holidays and things. I went to, I went all over. I've been to, went to Jordan. I went skiing with, through work as well. So the adventure training, I was able to take advantage of that. I went skiing. I even went out to New Zealand. But that was loosely linked to my military role, because when I later became a nurse. So when I did my nurse training, part of that course, we had some time for sort of personal and professional development. And I went and worked with special needs kids out in New Zealand, or a friend, again, a good friend that I'd made through the forces that I wouldn't have met otherwise, or our paths wouldn't have crossed. She turned around to me one day and said, "Oh, getting married? Oh, great. In Vegas. Okay. Do you want to come?" And without missing a beat, I was able to say yes, because I knew I only had to sort of account for myself. So that was a really good experience. I don't think we always realise what effect things are having. I think that's just the nature of the beast. We don't always realise. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with my brother, and again that was quite recent, where he said, "But you've missed out on settling down. You've missed out on starting a family. You've given your life and your time to the armed forces." And it was funny because I'd never really thought about it in those terms. But I think if I reflect, then yes, your path is very different when you join the armed forces. You're not at home anymore. So many of your people perhaps you knew from school or university will be at home building networks and relationships, and or spending family time together. I've got friends who do a lot as extended family. Part of that is my own sort of personal family, wider family circumstances, not necessarily directly because of military service. But yeah, that was a big thing. And it's only now sort of in later life, I think, when you perhaps understand yourself, you understand your priorities a bit better. I met my husband, my now husband, Matthew, and I was just really lucky that it worked out quite nicely, because it came at the end of my military career. So it was great knowing that we would be married and settled and be able to live a life together and not have to do the married unaccompanied, for example, being away from home and away from your partner. So I think in the armed forces you just meet so many people, when you come into contact with so many people. And again, I didn't necessarily, I think, as I said before, I didn't see sort of active service, if you want to call it that, like for example in Afghanistan or Operik, where I know lots of people had a horrendous time, and people were lost lots of friends and colleagues, and that kind of thing. For me, I knew perhaps lots of young people. I think you get to meet so many different people. I suppose there's two that sort of stick with me. There's a young girl, and I think she was as a young person perhaps sometimes disillusioned with sort of the military life and things, but she also engaged with it, loved it. I spent time with her. We had a bit of work together. We had a bit of a friendship, and I took her to Edinburgh. She came to visit. She had I taught her how to make scrambled eggs on the stove. Just the simplest of things, but it was fun. It was bonding. But again, she was sadly killed in a road traffic accident. It was a collision. The other driver was at fault, and again, it was that sort of that loss of such a young life. But again, at the funeral service, there were so many people sort of came together. She was a young person. She was a daughter, but something she was really proud of was her military service. And again, that was something that came across in the service. Again, was another lad that I worked with. He was a motorcyclist, and again, it was another loss, another accident. And again, it's that the nature of armed forces service is so many of the population are young, fit people. So any sort of death or accident is more likely to involve that sort of young person who's just sort of full of life and vitality, and that just gets snuffed out. So it doesn't make it any, it's not any more or less tragic, but I suppose you probably know more people who have passed, you know more people who have suffered life-changing injury or something like that. And I think especially for me as well, having moved into the healthcare profession, working, and anybody would tell you, working within the NHS and working as a nurse, you are with people sometimes at the worst point in their lives. But as an army nurse, I was able to work at the Defence Medical Rehabilitation Centre. And again, it's really the only space we have now where we work directly with military patients. Unfortunately, just the nature of the beast, we don't have military hospitals in the UK anymore, so we don't have that opportunity. But yeah, being able to work with the armed forces community, seeing people, fortunately in rehab, you're seeing people when they're recovering or they're out of the acute phase of their illness or injury and are sort of progressing back to a life. So again, although it's tinged with the sort of the sadness and understanding that they've gone through a life-changing event, you're sort of helping them on that positive pathway and to start a new life, whatever that might look like. For me, I think I try and focus on the positive. I mean, it's easy, again, like we alluded to, when you're dealing with younger people who would have otherwise had a fantastic life ahead of them. You especially if you're a parent and you want the best for your young person, and they grow up and go off and achieve so many things. I mean, you see somebody that's been cut down in their prime for whatever reason. And again, in terms of the population that were coming through the rehab process, again, we're not particularly active in operations at the moment, but there were still training injuries that had been sustained. I think we had somebody that had been a grenade incident, for example, in a training environment. But then likewise, we had things like people suffering a spinal stroke, young people coming down with illnesses that they hadn't realised they had, or sort of tumours, all sorts of things in the full spectrum. But I think you really have to focus on the positive, and I think it was because it's a purpose-built environment. We'd moved from Headley Court to Stamford Hall, and it was an amazing sort of purpose-built facility with medical consultants on site. We had the physios, occupational therapists. So there's a whole team there. Mental health support. So you knew that even calling them patients didn't really feel right, because the rehabilitation, the rehab, they are moving forward and they should be going on with their life, or whatever the next stage looks like. You knew they were in a good place and we're going to get a lot of support. So again, it was sort of like helping them sort of think positively about what their life was going to look like. For us as nurses on the ward, for example, we weren't really providing a lot of clinical care, because these individuals should effectively be managing themselves in terms of their sort of activities of daily living, as you'd call them. But so sometimes we were just there as a listening ear, and be able just to have a conversation with somebody. And at least once or twice I did have somebody sort of come and say, thank you. Not just to me personally, but to the team, sort of just being there. Like say if it was at like 3 o'clock in the morning when they couldn't sleep and were having sort of flashbacks and recurrent nightmares, or we're just talking through the significance of their injury and what it might mean. So yeah, and it was a fantastic opportunity, and I think it helped me realise moving forward that perhaps my strengths didn't lie in traditional clinical adult nursing, for example, but being in a position sort of perhaps more the welfare, mental health side, where you can actually have time to talk to people and help them process and make decisions that will impact them positively. I actually had a conversation in the careers office when I was my oath of attestation. So you basically swear you're going to serve the Queen, as was, but you swear to God. And I actually had a conversation with a chap in the careers office, and hats off to him. We actually had a conversation about what it meant, and we were able to work out that actually I was probably agnostic rather than atheist. I knew I didn't know what faith I was or if I had a belief, but we decided on agnostic, so I got to do the alternative attestation. So again, even right at the outset, I had support for that, which is in some ways a really small thing, but actually I think down the line was quite significant. I think within the armed forces I'd always had the opportunity to engage with the chaplaincy. So we have various chaplains attached to the armed forces. They serve alongside, various denominations, and I think my first pilgrimage was with a Church of Scotland minister who took us to Walsingham, for it was spiritual adventure training. So again, we had these opportunities to explore other things and talk about things. And it's, I think, very much when you're working in industry is not really the right word, but you're working in an environment where ultimately, potentially, you could be taking life. And certainly, you could be losing your, colleagues, or you could see it. And that's what war is. It's not pretty, And actually, the sort of spiritual questions or the ethical rationale behind things, it is important. It's important that people know they've got somebody they can turn to. And I always felt that our padres, as we call them, were, an underutilised resource. People would joke about, the padres coming around, but they're always there, whether it was with a cigarette or Haribo's or, and again, that listening ear. And I was fortunate enough to go on the International Military Pilgrimage to Lourdes. 1 year back in, I think 2009 was my first trip. And he'd said to me, it'll change you. And maybe not a lot, but definitely a little. It'll definitely change you. And, and never a true word was spoken. Every year since, bar COVID, I've been able to go. And again, that's something has been last minute, because I didn't know what I was doing, like work-wise, my military commitments, was I going to be able to be released to go? But I have done, and it became a very important part of my life and my, my annual, just my annual service, a really important part of my life. And then I was in a position where I was stationed in Catterick for a year. And that meant, because I knew I was, based somewhere for a year, I knew the local padre, and again, he was somebody I'd met through Lourdes. He was, Catholic priest, and actually, it was time and space for me to explore my faith, my spirituality, and actually, I had a really productive, formation in the faith, which ultimately resulted in me being baptised and confirmed in the Catholic Church. So I'm very much, I'm a military Catholic. My home church is the bishopric of the armed forces. So again, it's these things, isn't it? When actually, if I stop for a moment and reflect on it, that is huge. That is a big thing, and was part of my military service in terms of that exposure I had to the chaplaincy and spending time with people who had faith or who have faith and a belief, and actually be able to share that in sort of positive and constructive ways. I consider myself lucky. The nature of my sort of transition pathway was reasonably straightforward and reasonably easy, I think, for me in a lot of ways. Having become a nurse, joined the QAs, really in terms of how I lived and worked as a nurse, or my postings and jobs that I went to. I would very much travel as an individual. You would join a unit and you get to know people there, then you would move on. So, and as a nurse, I was working within NHS environments. So there was always that civilian-esque side to what we were doing. So you're working in sort of civilian environments. I've spent most of my career working in tri-service environments. So we were working alongside Navy and RAF colleagues. So in terms of, I'm trying to think what the words are, but in terms of being in a closed community or a bubble, I perhaps didn't have that so much, where, I think, for example, the young guys perhaps out in an infantry regiment where they very much live and work within the same body, might struggle, all their admin and stuff's taken care of. Whereas I was fortunate that I'd had an experience outside of the military before I joined up. I was then, things like I had bought a house, I'd gone off to uni again to do my nursing and working in that civilian environment. So I think that transition, or losing that identity as a serving person, hasn't been, too complicated. The process, I guess, in some ways was made a little bit easier. We do have, easier, I'm not sure it's the right word. We have resettlement time. So towards the end of our official end of service, so for me it was October last year, you get additional time to go and do additional training, to do your civil, for your civilian life, to time to work on your CV, time to apply for jobs. Unfortunately, I also had a bereavement, so I lost my mum, and that meant I had time off for sick or sick leave. So I suppose I was actually forced to reevaluate my sort of personal position, my priorities and things a little bit earlier than perhaps what I would have done. And again, what it meant for me is, because of the way the system works and because we get the support if we're on long-term sick, I mean, I actually had an extended period, if you like, of effectively resettlement. So my period of sick leave ran into my resettlement. So I had, because of, you know, the nature of the work, I was supported through that time. But yeah, so that made it a little bit, the transition piece easier. Obviously personal circumstances challenging. So yeah, I consider myself lucky that my transition was, don't want to say seamless, but you know, it went well, or I feel it's gone well. You know, female soldier, female serving personnel. I suppose for me, I think on reflection, I could probably see a few more. The issues might be quite strong, but perhaps those disparities that might sort of come out, sort of the balance, you know, and balance of gender and how people are treated and things. I was always somebody at school who had male friends. You know, I didn't have a close group of female friends, but I seemed to get on with boys better and that kind of thing. I was also, when I joined up as well, we still had mixed, basic training was still mixed, and because I joined the nature of the corps I joined, the intelligence course, they had a lot of people who were a little bit older as well. So people, rather than joining up 16, 17, 18, they were probably in their early 20s. So, and it was a mixed group. So we had sort of a slightly older crowd, male and female, and we bonded really well, I think, as a group. And I think we probably had that nice sort of dynamic and that nice balance. So yeah, so I know I really enjoyed that. So in terms of my working relationships with my peers, you know, I was more than happy. I do remember we did have the conversation with our platoon sergeant at the time. He did take the girls aside and obviously just say, at the end of the day, as a female, you know, you know, it can go sort of one or two ways. I think it was that he alluded to this sort of either the whore, or the, you know, the tease, or the, you know, somebody who was, you know, frigid, and that kind of sort of language of knowing that, and sort of just being very careful about how you engage with people in your sort of free time and that kind of stuff. And I think it was, again, it's one of those things, it's not a conversation that you'd like somebody to have with your daughter, but I think it was a reflection of the times. I think it was a reflection of the military environment, and an understanding of, perhaps without having the emotional intelligence or the sort of language behind it, about how vulnerable young people are, especially young women working in sort of close quarters with men, can be. Otherwise, I think, again, it's difficult to separate what you think is just like your personality and engaging with people as to whether that was because you were female or because you were male. I know that I enjoyed one of my first jobs when I worked in Northern Ireland. I was the vehicle rep for the section. So we had a selection of cars that we used in our work and being out and about. And I mean, I had to liaise with the mechanics in the workshop, you know, to make sure the cars were serviced regularly and all that kind of stuff. But I actually quite enjoyed that, because you know, you go and you talk to people, and I think the fact, one, it was the talking to people I think that helped. But yes, I don't think you can get away from the fact that as a female presenting yourself, you can be probably just a bit more chatty, a bit more cheery, a bit more sort of how are you sort of thing. It doesn't sound, you know, strange. So, but it was nice because it helped me sort of build relationships. I think it was that being confident to just go and speak to people, and rather than just discuss the job in hand, you'd be talking to them about how their day was, how their things went. So I think, yes, I think I sort of reasonably savvy to the fact, as a female, you could work into a workspace, and actually, I think just because your presence as a female would be slightly different to their normal working routine, it probably gave you an in to talk to, and I always felt that it was a positive thing. It wasn't in any way a negative thing. And then in terms of the roles I've had, I don't think I've ever been like the only female. I think in terms of, you know, the intelligence corps, for example, is a corps that's quite balanced in terms of, you know, male and female. And moving into nursing, again, predominantly female profession, so actually, you know, an even larger numbers of females in your sort of day-to-day working. I mean, I have heard stories of, you know, young women, for example, who join up, they're perhaps working as a clerk, and they're sent off, you know, as a young woman, 18, 19 years old, first job in the forces, and they're sent to an infantry squadron, you know, and you know, and they are the clerk for however many men are on, you know, are in the unit. So again, I can only imagine their sort of lived experience would be very different. I think the armed forces is a very difficult thing to give up. After 22 years, I knew I was ready to leave service. I mean, I don't think I had any qualms about that. I think, and you know, and like I said, fortunate to have met my husband Matthew, and you know, and again, he's currently serving. He's transitioning as well. He's coming to the end of his service. But knowing that I have a life moving forward is really good. I think something I have always felt a sense of duty about was giving back to the armed forces community. And again, it's that thing, because it has given me a lot. I think, you know, it's afforded me a certain lifestyle, it got me on the housing ladder, so many experiences and so many friends. So there's always that sort of part of me that, you know, wants to give back. And I think that sense of community and community spirit, I mean, should be embraced regardless of whether, you know, how and where you served, or, you know, what sphere you work in. It's outside of being in the armed forces. But I obviously have that affinity for the armed forces. So again, working within a charity that supports the armed forces community, I think it's just such a, you know, lovely way to be able to give back. You know, we are a small charity with a big heart. I think it's fair to say, and we're trying to achieve a lot with not a lot. You know, our resources are limited, and we're working hard, but I think we mean a lot to a lot of people. So yeah. And for me, actually having a job, it was interesting. I heard somebody speaking about why she'd taken on a role, and what she said about, you know, I was in the right place at the right time, and I feel I'm where I'm meant to be. And it sounds a bit cheesy, and it sounds a bit twee, but on reflection, I think, you know, even speaking to my colleagues at the bridge, that's how I feel. I mean, it's been lovely that it's a part-time role. So as a part-time role, it means I have still got time to do other things, which is great. And it's a really sort of creative and supportive environment. I think in the military you can sometimes be quite confined. It can be very, people will quite often look at the rank on your chest before they listen to your opinion. So, you know, as an organisation and a structure, it can be detrimental. It's, you know, it's a very much a straight, you know, up and down. It's very much a hierarchy, whereas it's really refreshing to be in an environment where you're very much working as a team, we're contributing, I can make decisions, you know, that'll be supported. I think having that confidence is really good. And, you know, I think we're a lovely bunch of people, and I think we're just, you know, our working dynamic, I think it's getting there. I think, you know, we've got a lot to offer, and hopefully that's going to take the Bridge for Heroes, you know, through 2024 and beyond. I think there's that conversation, is there, about what a veteran is. I'm comfortable using the term veteran now, but I think that's largely due to the fact that working in the charity environment, I understand that when we say veteran, we mean somebody that's had a day of paid service in, well, now His Majesty's Armed Forces, whether it's regular or reserve, and that's the box that needs to be ticked. So it doesn't matter how you served, where you served, you know, the circumstances of your discharge. So I'm sort of happy using it in that context. But I think historically, and certainly my experience, when I say veteran, you know, I think of the old chap in his in a wheelchair being pushed past the cenotaph. I think, you know, and again, it's still that, still thinking about D-Day, we're still thinking about, you know, the Second World War, or perhaps even bringing it forward to perhaps the Falklands. You know, so again, it has another meaning. So it's how we engage people, or meet people as, you know, where they are, how they identify, the services we offer. Again, I think people can be quick to offer help, or want to help, or set something up to help. But if it's not what the individual wants or needs, they're not going to access that service. And it doesn't matter, you know, how much funding you've had, how much time and effort, and you're like, oh, but no, and it might not be what we want. So for me, it's about, we need to create a dialogue, we need to engage. So yeah, I think talking to female veterans is really important, and finding out, you know, how they identify, you know, what they want to be called, what sort of help they want. I think, you know, recent research has shown that the sort of armed forces and veteran services very much are male dominated, male targeted, so women wouldn't necessarily see them as services that they would use, you know, as a woman, never mind as a, you know, ex-service personnel. So yeah, I think we need to have these conversations. We need to, it's difficult, isn't it, because language carries so many meanings, and it's unfortunate that one word can carry different meanings. And I think it's not about not wanting to offend. I think, you know, we need to get away from that, but it's helping people see themselves in what we've got to offer, recognise that they're valued for their service, that they have given something, and that yeah, they can access these services. I think as well, it needs to be sort of more positive focused in some ways. I think very much we can focus too much on the sort of crisis side of things, and people sort of coming to us when they are, you know, in the depths of despair, they're at crisis point, they're at breaking point, they are contemplating suicide. These are all things that, yes, it's important that people know they've got safe spaces they can come to, but at the same time, actually, wouldn't it be better to engage people earlier, you know, invite them into social environments, help them, you know, build up confidence, develop peer groups, develop, you know, and be somewhere where they can sort of discuss their shared experiences. So yeah, I'd like it to be positive. I'd like it to be, again, open to all, but people sort of look at us and say, yeah, actually, that's somewhere I want to be or want to be a part of.